Hi, I'd just like to welcome you all. My name is Sheldon Lazarus. I'm coming live from London on this very, very special day. I am honoured and absolutely privileged to have been invited to come and join in on this incredibly important day of Yom Hashoah. I'm a television producer who have made a number of Holocaust-related films in my career, and I just wanted to talk you through some of my stories and specifically two films that I've made. Anybody who's got any questions, please send them in. I'd like this to be an open discussion if we can, with the power of technology. A little bit of a backstory. I'm obviously based here in London. I made my first film about the Shoah, about the Holocaust, in 1999, where I was very privileged and lucky to have met three cousins, Shlomo Venezia, Morris Venezia, and Dario Gabai. Who basically were three cousins who came, who were brought up in Salonika in Greece. Now their story is pretty extraordinary. They were captured as young men in Salonika and taken to Auschwitz and made to work in the gas chambers as Sonderkommandos. We made a film in 1999 about them. We're going to show a clip very soon about their story, their extraordinary story. Just recently, last year, to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, I made a very special documentary called Auschwitz Untold. We're also going to show a clip in the short hour that I have this morning. This was made for Channel 4 in the UK and for also the History Channel in America. It was probably the most important, absolutely one of the most important projects I've ever been involved in, and I'll explain why. I hadn't made a film about this important area of history for probably 20 years. I thought with the film that I made about Dario and the Sonderkommandos, I made another film about the Kindertransport as well, and also a very special film about Rabbi Schonfeld, who was a real tzaddik, a godel in the world, who saved many children, generations he saved. After making those three projects in quite quick succession, from the late 90s onwards, I thought I'd told everything I could possibly tell. Then Steven Spielberg incredibly launched the Shoah Foundation, and last October I suddenly realized it was 25 years since the release of Schindler's List, which had the most incredible effect on myself, my life, my friends, my family's lives back then 25 years ago. I remember going, I'm from Leeds, my family are from the north of England, in a place called Leeds. I think my mum and dad are watching now. Hi, mum and dad. And all my family are watching, I think, in London as well. This is considered homeschooling. I went to watch Schindler's List with about 10 friends. We sat there in awe because we'd never really understood, growing up Jewish in Leeds around that time, a lot of Holocaust survivors weren't telling their stories. It was Schindler's List, I think, that sort of was the sort of tipping point. And we were in awe of that film. We remember coming out of the film in tears after watching that and realizing, wow, this is extraordinary. And then it hit me in October. It was 25 years since the release of that epic and very important film. And I'm thinking to myself, what can I do as a filmmaker that can have an effect in the year 2019, when, thank God, we still have our precious diamonds still around, being able to tell their stories. And what's different about our film Auschwitz in Color, Auschwitz Untold, was we made a conscious effort to only interview people who had incredible stories to tell. We didn't use any archive interviews. So we managed to gather around the world 16 precious diamonds who are all very close. Some of them may be watching today and who have become friends of ours and our families, who shared graciously their incredible stories. We also made a conscious decision with Auschwitz Untold, in consultation with the History Channel in America and in consultation with Channel 4, not to interview on camera any historians. Behind the scenes, there was rigorous fact-checking, obviously, because we had to be robust in our history. But we realized that we wanted the survivors, we call them our diamonds, to be able to tell freely their stories and their experiences, which we did. I think now we're going to show a little trailer of to show you what you can expect in Auschwitz Untold in color. Wow, so that's a little taste of Auschwitz Untold in Color. We're going to show a slightly longer clip very shortly. Wow, so where do I start with this project? So, not to embarrass my daughter's doing her was doing her GCSEs, her exams in the UK, and I was looking through her history textbooks, and we're a Jewish family whose dad has made 3 Holocaust films, related films, and I picked up her textbook. And I'm looking at the black and white photos in her textbook. And I mean, it's a terrible thing to say, but I did not feel I had any connection to any of the black and white imagery that was trying to be taught to our next generation. So I thought, what can we do to change? Peter Jackson, the incredible filmmaker, recently made a film, some of you may have seen it, about World War I, where he very cleverly managed to work with the Imperial War Museum and use incredible archive and audio tapes of World War I soldiers, which were recorded in the 60s. And he colorized the imagery. And it was remarkable. It showed World War I like you've never seen before. I'm suddenly thinking, is it too controversial to take Holocaust footage and footage from the time and colorize it? And I'm thinking to myself, is that just too controversial? Is that a step too far? Because I mean, I remember with Schindler's List, people do remember the little girl with the coat, the red coat, at the end of the film. That was the only part that Steven Spielberg colorized, was the red coat. And that stuck with me for 25 years. And I'm thinking, is that a step too far? Is that by any way opening up to unnecessary criticism from the critics out there, from the haters? And there are haters and there are critics out there, whatever you do. But by taking black and white imagery, are they going to say it's manipulation? I thought long and hard, but I thought, you know, I think this is a project that should be done. Because if you think about it, the world we're living in, and especially these crazy times where we're all locked in our houses, and the way that the use of technology has sort of overtaken us even more in the past couple of months since lockdown, or a couple of months since lockdown. So I mentioned it to a couple of colleagues, and they said, do not go there. This is too controversial. And then I suddenly decided I'm going to do it. I went to see Channel 4 in the UK. I told them the idea, and they were very intrigued by the idea. I said I wanted to do Auschwitz in color. And interestingly, they recoiled and thought that the title was crass. But if you think about it, Auschwitz happened in color. There's an incredible story told by Eric Pickles, the incredible politician in the UK, who has done a lot for Holocaust education. He was, I think, at the 70th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz with some of the Holocaust survivors who went over from the UK. And it was a beautiful, I think it was a May day, and it was gorgeous. Oh, the birds were singing, the whole thing. Eric said to the Holocaust survivor, this was 5 years ago, what does it feel like being here when it's a sunny day and you hear the birds singing? The survivor said, listen, I lived through this in color. I lived through this situation in color. Then we set about trying to find our diamonds. And boy, what diamonds did we find? We found the most incredible collection of gorgeous diamonds from all over the world. I'm going to talk you through who we managed to interview in our documentary. In the US, in America, if anybody wants to read in lockdown or anytime, a most amazing book, you have to read the book called The Choice by Dr. Judith Eger. Born in 1927 in Slovakia, she had a sister who was a violin prodigy and managed to hide in Budapest during the war. She trained as a ballet dancer and was taken to Auschwitz and had to dance for Dr. Mengele, Yimach Shemo. Her parents both died in Auschwitz. She is still to this day in California working psychologist. The Choice is an essential book to read. She graciously agreed to be interviewed in our very special film. Mr. Bill Harvey, who I had the honor of meeting in Los Angeles at the end of January when we launched the film, which was an honor of mine. We launched the film in America at the Simon Wiesenthal Center. Bill was on the panel with myself speaking. He is the most extraordinary person. He found his life in America after the Shoah and became a celebrity hairdresser to the stars. Born in 1924 in Czechoslovakia, his dad was a winemaker and his mother was a homemaker. He first heard about Hitler, Yimach Shemo the Zichron, on the radio when he was 12 years old. He also saw newsreels and propaganda at the cinema. He was in the ghetto and survived Auschwitz and Buchenwald. Unfortunately, his father, Zeichet Tzadik Levracha, was killed by the Nazis, Yimach Shemo, in 1943, and his mother was sent to the gas chamber on arrival at Auschwitz. Later, as I said, he became a celebrity hairstylist in the 1950s in Los Angeles, owning 2 beauty salons, including the Continental House of Beauty, very famous in Beverly Hills. He did hair for Zsa Zsa Gabor and a young Liza Minnelli. Yehuda Samet, most extraordinary story. He is a double survivor and an incredible person. He survived the Pittsburgh shooting just recently. In 1938, he was born in Hungary. Age 6, he and his family were taken to Bergen-Belsen. The train had been rerouted from Auschwitz, and he narrowly, as I mentioned, escaped the 2018 shocking Pittsburgh Synagogue Tree of Life shooting, a double survivor. These are our diamonds who tell their story and will tell their story for eternity, their extraordinary story. One of the things, interestingly, one of the first meetings I took with one of the couple of TV channels and about this documentary, they asked me why now. I said, I'll tell you why. Because diamonds are still around, being able to tell their story. Our film, and looking through this extraordinary program that Rabbi Schiff and all his colleagues have managed to put together today. For me, Yom HaShoah, and I don't want to say anything controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway. Yom HaShoah to me is not about death. This is about life. We are living this story. This is a living, true story. As long as we have, Baruch Hashem, our diamonds with us, being able to share their experiences, we can learn from those experiences. And I remember going to see the Chief Rabbi of Great Britain Rabbi Mervis, Chief Rabbi Rabbi Mervis, before we launched our film. He very graciously, the Chief Rav, very graciously agreed to give a special message of support to our film. And I sat in the few moments I had with the very busy Chief Rabbi, and I said to the Chief Rabbi, is it true? Is this what we're doing? The next wave of Shoah education? Is this the story of life? And the Chief Rav said, this is a living and breathing story. And we have to, for all eternity, not forget that we have to educate. And that's the most important thing. Moving on, we have Esther Weiser in our film. I don't want to give any spoiler alerts. The film is available on the Channel 4 website in the UK. You can watch it on the website, the 2 episodes. And we were honored. It was screened last night across Israel, which was an absolute honor for me. This is my home office. Obviously, I'm in lockdown. This is where I came up with the idea of Auschwitz Untold in color over a year ago. And it's just humbling to hear from friends, relatives in Israel who watched the film last night on this special, very, very special day of Yom HaShoah. So Dr. Weiser, Esther Weiser, she was born in Buchenwald concentration camp in 1945. Her parents were from a small town near Krakow, and they spoke Yiddish. Her mother was an actress in the local town, and they loved reading. Moishler, unfortunately, her little brother, was murdered when he was thrown by the Nazis into a ditch. Now, the most extraordinary story about Esther was conceived in July 1944 when both her parents were in a work camp together. They married and they were childhood sweethearts. Her mother was pregnant. So Esther is probably the youngest survivor of the Shoah, and she is in our film. Irvin Roth in Long Island, born in 1929 in Czechoslovakia. His father owned a lumber business and his mother was a homemaker. He remembers seeing Yiddish theater. That's another thing that I want to talk to you about very shortly. About this film is about the sort of closing down of Yiddish culture. Often I think a lot of people think, and they look at the Shoah, that it was just, Orthodox Jews with beards being herded into, God forbid, herded into cattle trucks. It wasn't. The Jewish world was a very wide Jewish world, from the not yet religious to the religious. And what was literally cancelled overnight was the most extraordinary Yiddish theater, Yiddish culture, and Yiddish movie industry, which we'll come on to talk about in a minute. He was taken to Auschwitz in 1944 and worked with the horses. And he was able to pray every day as a little boy in Auschwitz with a smuggled Siddur, smuggled prayer book. What we're going to do now is we're going to pause. We're going to show a short section. I think we'll show 10 minutes of the opening section of Auschwitz Untold in color. If anybody's got any questions, please send them in, and I will see you in 10 minutes. And then we're going to talk further about the Yiddish cinema, the Yiddish theater industry, and how that collapsed just before the war. We've got a special sneak preview of something that wasn't even in our film. And then we're also going to talk about Dario Gabay, who unfortunately died recently. Dario, we love you, we remember you, and we're going to remember you today on this special Yom HaShoah. I think we're going to show a clip now. I think I think we're having sound issues, so we're going to pause the clip now. Sorry. I think we'll pause the clip. Maybe we'll come back to that if we've got a bit of time. Okay. So just talking you through some of our, so where was I? So what was interesting about this film is when we put the crew together, we looked for a director, and we found the most incredible director in a director called David Shulman. What we decided was we did not want a director who had ever made a film about this subject before, because I think what was important, we wanted to approach this whole subject through fresh eyes. And that's what we did. We found David Shulman, who had won numerous awards and made many, many documentaries, very, very experienced. And I think what was important with David was he used to ask questions. I went along to most of the filming in the UK, and we were filmed all over. We filmed in Poland. We filmed actually at Auschwitz. We filmed in America. We also filmed in France. We found probably the only Romani survivor of the Holocaust still alive, living in France, which is an extraordinary find. We found a freedom fighter living in Europe, which was extraordinary as well. But David had this knack of asking questions that nobody could ask. And some of them, we had so much footage. I mean, we have got so much footage, which we're hoping to do something. We had a meeting with Yad Vashem in Israel, and hopefully they're going to take over the whole archive, because we interviewed each of our survivors, each of our diamonds, for over 6 hours per person. So the testimony, the stories that we have, really pretty extraordinary. I'll share with you 2 stories which we actually didn't feature in the film because we just didn't have time. And if please indulge if our survivors are watching. I hope you don't mind me sharing these stories, but they are truly wonderful stories and very inspirational stories. Jewish Care, the organization in the UK, do most extraordinary work and obviously help with repatriation funds to a lot of Holocaust survivors. And one of our diamonds was from Hungary and was given the opportunity of having some money from the Hungarian government. And she was asked to fill out some forms, and they filled out some forms. They were helping her fill out some forms. And on the form it said, "What was your job in the war?" And this lady said, "I didn't have a job. I was 12 years old." Okay, so I'm not going to get the money from the Hungarian government. Just as the person who was helping her fill out the forms was about to leave her house, she said, "Well, hold on a minute, let me tell you a story." She was in a little village, and her grandma was the tailoress of the village, and she was an incredible tailor and seamstress, and amazing with her hands. And this little 12-year-old girl used to sit and make all the yellow stars for the village, and I didn't realize that all clothing, not just the outer garment, had to have a yellow star. So they used to go through a lot of yellow stars. And this grandma used to make the yellow stars. And this little girl used to help make the yellow stars. It was arts and crafts. And she'd make the yellow stars. and they make hundreds of them. And she told this story, and they thought, well, that sounds like child labor to me. So they put it on the form. The Hungarian government sent the form, and she got her money, slave labor. The other story, which is really extraordinary, with one of our gems, one of our diamonds, was in Auschwitz with her mum and her sister. And I think it was the day of arrival, they went to get their tattoos on their arms. They went to get their tattoos on their arms. And they were waiting in the queue. And the mum went first, had their number on the arm. Our survivor went second. And the person who was doing the tattooing said to the survivor, said to my survivor, our survivor, no, go to the back of the queue. Okay. Then her sister went first, and then they forgot our survivor. And the way this story came out was the cameraman noticed that our friend did not have a number on her arm. She survived the whole experience in Auschwitz without a number. They forgot to put the number on her arm. A few years ago, she wrote to the Auschwitz Museum, the Auschwitz Museum in Poland, in Auschwitz, Birkenau, for her record card. And I held the record card in my hand. They sent the record card to her. And I'm looking at the record card, and her number, which should have been on her arm, is on the record card. Extraordinary story. Now, I don't know if you managed to notice in the trailer and also the little clip that I showed just before, but there is an extraordinary collection of photographs, which is the only real living testimony of what went on the last transports, the Hungarian last transports in Auschwitz. And we were so blessed to be able to use these photos, thanks to Serge Klarsfeld, the intrepid Sergeant Beat Klarsfeld, based in Paris, the two intrepid Nazi hunters who are still active to this day. Serge and his wife Beat are human rights lawyers, still active to this day. And I had the honor and the merit of being in his office when we went to ask permission to use these extraordinary photographs. And if you have not read or heard about the Auschwitz album, I'm going to tell you a little about it now, but please read about it. There is a book that you can buy, and it's the most extraordinary story. And I'll tell you now the story. So basically, Lily Jacob, this is a story that if it wasn't true, you couldn't make it up because it's too extraordinary. Lily Jacob was 18-year-old. She was 18. She was deported from Auschwitz, like most of the Jews of Hungary, near the end of the war, on one of the last transports in the spring of 1944. On the ramp in Auschwitz, she was unfortunately separated, like a lot of children, from her parents and her younger brothers, and she never saw any of them again. She was one of the lucky ones who survived, yet she was not always convinced of the bracha, of the blessing of having survived, because she survived totally alone, bereft of all her family and her friends and her whole world. Unlike other survivors, she was granted a small miracle. On the day of her liberation, in the Dora concentration camp, hundreds of miles from Auschwitz, she found, this is most extraordinary, in the deserted SS barracks, a photo album. It contained, among others, pictures of her family, can you believe it, and her friends as they arrived on the ramp and unknowingly awaited their death. It was a unique tie to what once had been, could never return, or could never be rebuilt. We had the honor and the privilege of colorizing these photographs for the first time, thanks to Serge Klarsfeld. The day that our film was about to be launched in January, getting ready for Holocaust Memorial Day to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, I pray in a synagogue in Hendon, round the corner from my house. Someone came up to me and said, I read about your film in the newspaper. I think it was in the Daily Mirror or in the Times. A number of the newspapers picked up on this new film that's going to be colorizing footage of Auschwitz and of the Holocaust. And lo and behold, my wife noticed in one of the colorized photos a picture of her late father. who obviously survived the war. He survived up until a few years ago in Israel. She could not believe that she saw her late dad in the photos colorized. Brings shivers, brings goosebumps. And this was her father, Sholem, was in one of the photos discovered by Lily in this Essex barracks. It's the only known photographic evidence of Jews arriving at Auschwitz or any other death camp. The story gets better. After the war, Lily found and married Max Zlomevovic, a pre-war friend who she knew pre-war, which is extraordinary, selling glass plate prints of the album to the Jewish Museum in Prague, enabled the couple and their firstborn daughter to emigrate to the United States of America. They settled in Miami and raised a family, yet the album continued to be central to their lives. Survivors spread the word of a unique album in the possession of a waitress in Miami and made their way across the country to seek her out. And the person who found her was Serge Klarsfeld, the Nazi hunter. He got on a plane to Miami with a photographer. All Lee wanted was for this photo album to be given to the Jewish people. It still to this day survives in the actual original album is in the Yad Vashem Museum, gifted by Lily and her family to the Yad Vashem Museum. And she didn't want anything for it, obviously. All she wanted to do was to meet in Israel. She'd never been to Israel before. Rarely someone would identify a family member and Lily would give them a snapshot of the album, since most of the Jews were murdered, leaving no trace. And most of the photos remain unclaimed. And the unclaimed photos today are in Auschwitz. Unfortunately, Lily passed away in 1999. But what she did, also part of it, she said to Serge, I want to meet the Prime Minister, Menachem Begin. And I want to give it to Prime Minister Begin in his hands, which she did. And there's an amazing photo in Yad Vashem of Lily handing it over to Menachem Begin. This incredible, living testimony to what went on. And we are honored to have used it in our film. We haven't got much time left, and I obviously don't want to overrun. I also want to thank everybody today for listening to my story on this very, very special day. But in the last few moments, we've got 15 minutes left. I want to talk about Dario Gabay, who unfortunately died. It's going to be his shloshim 30 days ago. This Thursday is going to be the shloshim of Dario, who was a dear friend of mine, who I met, as I mentioned, in 1999 when I took him and his late two cousins back to Auschwitz for the first time. We might have a clip. I don't know whether the sound on the clips has been sorted out, but should we try a clip of a little bit of Dario's film? Let's see if we can see if the sound works. We're going to try now. Now, bearing in mind this was made in 1999, when Dario and his two cousins went back to Auschwitz the very first time. If the sound doesn't work, we'll come back and we'll talk more about Dario.
This is a true story set in the context of concentration. This is a story. chunks of time in the body, but the things themselves have to be frozen. But what is this?
Okay, I think we've got sound issues. I'm so sorry about that. I think we have sound issues. Okay, awfully sorry. Okay, so where are we? So we made the film with Dario. For the first time, we took both Dario and his two cousins back, and it was the most extraordinary experience, not just personally, but also I think for the three, because they'd never been back since the Death March, and we were basically taking back three eyewitnesses to the attempted final solution, and it was an extraordinary experience. And since 1999, Dario and myself, Morris and Shlomo, unfortunately, are no longer with us as well. They died a few years ago. Dario and myself and my family, we've been friends, and deep friends, and we've been in touch. I go to Los Angeles quite often for work, and we've been in touch all through the years. I saw Dario last June, and I also saw him again at the end of January. And unfortunately, he passed away, as I said, at the beginning of the month. What Dario taught me over the years was, no matter what you go through in life, you have to continue. He made a life for himself in America. He had a very hard time, straight after the war. It was very hard for an immigrant from Salonika to pick his life up again, especially after seeing what he went through in the camps. But Dario taught me the power of positive thinking and always being happy. It's very, very important. And this is the thing that I think is one of the most important messages, and why I've been so blessed to be able to make this film and having the backing to make this film through Channel 4, through the History Channel, also through my family. It was hard work making the film, but we did it. And I think what was important, and one of the highlights was at the launch, I went up to the north of England, Bradford, to show it to Bradford University, Bradford College. And it was an extraordinary experience. It was a very mixed crowd. It was a non-Jewish crowd. It was the first time we'd actually shown it to a totally non-Jewish audience. And these were students who, there was a standing ovation at the end of the film. And the students came up to me at the end, not understanding, saying to me, why were we never taught any of this? Holocaust and Shoah education, and I think what JRoots is doing, not just for the Jewish world, but for the wider world, is so, so important. It is so, so important. And I think, events like this, long may they continue. And when I was lighting the candles last night with my family, the yellow, amazing yellow candles, you suddenly realize that this is a living story. This is not something that's going to be confined to the dusty history books. And that's, a little way that hopefully we did something using the colorization technique. There have been some critics. I'm not going to lie. There have been some critics. Majority of our 16 survivors, our diamonds, were supportive of our efforts to colorize the footage when we explained to them the reason why. And it's for the younger generation, not just the younger generation. It's to make people understand and realize that this is not history. What we are going through the next full day with Lord Sachs and everybody else and all the incredible guest speakers, this is living history. There's a huge difference from learning about the Greeks and the Romans. There's a huge difference. This is living history. And we have to take the lessons of the past. This wasn't long ago. Very, very, in the end of January, when I went to see Dario, we're chatting like I chat with my friends. This is living history. I always tell a story, Dario, for many, 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 many years. I mean, unfortunately, he got, the past couple of years, his legs have not been great. He was in his middle 90s. His legs weren't great. But before then, he was literally every day in the gym. He put most of us to shame in terms of his fitness and his healthy eating routine. The amount of times we spent in Gelson's, which is like the Waitrose of Los Angeles, because they sold the best avocados. Dario, we love you. And I'll never forget you teaching me about the 5 a day, that you must have 5 a day. But we used to go to a hotel where he used to stay in Los Angeles. That was his gym. And when I was there, I always stay there out of respect for Dario, even though he doesn't obviously no longer goes to the gym. And one of the car valets who worked on the door of the hotel, been there 30 years, is still working there. And I said, I'm going to go and see Dario. And he gave this message to Dario from his hospital bed back in the end of January. Dario, people like Dario, you know, they teach us to live. We have to live life. We have to live life with the lessons of the past. It's very important. And especially what we've all been going through, locked in our homes, locked in our home offices. It's a shame that I can't speak to you in person, all of you, you know, but I think it's taught us to think about our lives, think about how we can improve our lives. And once we get out of our homes, back into normal society, once they start opening up things again, they open up the schools, the shuls, the museums, they open up, you know, all our facilities, we can go and meet our friends again. You know, it's important, you know, we have to smile, we have to be happy, we have to, you know, social distancing is not about being distant from people. And that's a really important message, and a message that I have learned from this whole experience. I just want to thank you for allowing me to share some of my stories about our project. If anybody's interested, they can, I don't know if we've got any questions. You know, if there are any questions, please let me know. Rabbi Schiff and JRoots have my details. As I said, if you're not in London, in the UK, you can watch it on the 4OD free of charge, the 2 episodes. If you know, I'd love to hear your comments. What's your thoughts about colorization? You know, it was controversial, but we think that we did something that is valuable. And I just want to thank you. And I'm looking forward to watching the rest of the day. And thank you for inviting me and for sharing some of my stories and my thoughts, my random thoughts. And the last thing I want to leave with you is, be strong, everybody. We have a rich and illustrious history, the Jewish people have, and we have to be proud of it. We have to learn from it, and we have to learn from the hardships of the past to make a better future. And I just want to thank you.